Hello, and welcome to a short brief on what is an evidence-based practice. Within your teaching, you're going to encounter a lot of instances of when you need some assistance on how to help a specific student. And so it's important to know where to turn. The purpose of this short video is to explain what an evidence-based practice is and what it is not. An evidence-based practice means that an intervention, or potentially a curriculum, has been shown through scientific study to be effective at what it is supposed to do. For example, if it is an intervention on increasing reading fluency among second grade students, an evidence-based practice means that that research has been shown to be effective and has been published and reviewed by peers in the field in which it was created. Interventions that have been submitted to journals go through a peer review process. And what that means is that the journals are submitted without the author's names listed on the journal to protect the integrity of the research. Those journals are then reviewed by a group of individuals that are professionals in the field in a blind study. What they will do is they'll read the research, they'll read the findings, the data that's presented, and make a determination as to whether each individual reviewer feels that the research meets the test of that it is an evidence-based practice. Those reviewers will then submit back to the editor of the journal saying, yes, that meets my standard, and then the editor will then read the reviews from multiple peer reviewers and then determine should that research then be placed in the journal. Once it is placed in the journal, it has been evaluated by multiple researchers in the field to determine that yes, the research is sound and that the practice is indeed evidence-based. There are a number of peer-reviewed journals, more than certainly I could list at this point, but there are a number of sites that house summaries of those research findings in an easy-to-use format that educators can pick through quickly. The sites that I often mention are the Florida Center for Reading Research, often abbreviated FCRR, or interventioncentral.com. Both of those sites list resources that have been published in peer-reviewed journals. The What Works Clearinghouse is also an important resource that is supported by the United States government. On this site, you can click any number of areas that you would like to learn more information about and find resources about. And when you click on that, it will then bring you to a link that has a number of both interventions and curricula that have been researched by an independent researcher and then posted on this site. Not everything that is listed on this site is an evidence-based practice. Simply because it's on here does not mean that. In fact, there are a number of resources that are listed on this site, on the What Works Clearinghouse, that are in fact not evidence-based. In some cases, have been shown to have harmful effect on students. Among those resources that have sometimes been found to be effective or not very effective, and in some cases harmful, are resources that have been produced by the publisher themselves. And so what I want to do is to make you aware of a fact that is not well known by educators, and it is that sometimes when publishers are creating their like a curriculum that they want to sell to a school district, they ask for researchers to come in and do a study for them on that research. And it's important as educators that we understand that those reports that are created for the publishers at the request of the publishers are not peer-reviewed sources. They may have references to peer-reviewed sources, and those curriculum may include some evidence-based practices, the more the better, of course, but then themselves need to go through their own independent evaluation and peer-reviewed process before we as school districts can say they are an evidence-based practice. Simply because the researcher provides a study that has been conducted by somebody they have asked to conduct that is not sufficient to say it's an evidence-based practice. And as a school leader and as a teacher, you should be thinking at all times, what does the researcher have at stake in writing this research? And in the case of somebody being asked to create a report for a publishing company, they are getting paid by the publishing company, and it is impossible for them to be 100% independent in their research. You should instead turn to evidence based journals, which is why we use that term so strongly in our practice, because those individuals do not have a stake at this. It would be not all that unsimilar to going to a grocery store and picking up a pamphlet from Tylenol about how effective Tylenol was and how horrible Advil was. If the report was created by somebody who worked for Tylenol, you should be skeptical, and I think you would be, of whether that report was valid and indeed was not biased in some way. So, what you should be looking for when you look for interventions with students that you work with is evidence of them being peer reviewed and conducted by an independent person. Excuse me. Sites like the Florida Center for Reading Research or Intervention Central are great places to start because they house links to those interventions. I'm going to quickly show you an intervention on Intervention Central. The title of this is How to Promote Phonics Success, Word Boxes, and Word Sort. And on Intervention Central, it lists a number of resources, including a recording form, a practice sheet, a word sort practice sheet, and a number of instructions on what you as the teacher could do to implement this practice in your classroom. The Intervention Central site in itself is not the evidence-based practice. It is a housing of that. Instead, at the bottom, they list the research study that supports this, and it's by Joseph in 2002. Facilitated word recognition and spelling using word boxes and word sort phonics procedures. It was published in School Psychology Review in issue 31, pages 122 to 129. If you went to search this within the ACT system, you would be able to find this exact journal and could read this journal should you want to. This is an example of an evidence-based practice. The Intervention Central is certainly a good place to start because it would show you exactly how to implement this practice in your classroom in a very user-friendly manner. But the Joseph article that is published in School Psychology Review is actually the evidence-based practice. I want to show you an example of a publisher report. This is from Reading Horizons, and by clicking on Download the Study here on Elementary Practice Research Packet, we can see the exact kind of white paper study that has been created for Reading Horizons. As you can see, their name is at the top. That should instantly tell you this is a report from a publisher. And it has a lot of great information in here about how this Reading Horizons curriculum was implemented in a number of school districts, and it talks about those throughout the report. This report is a number of pages. I don't know how many, probably 60 or 70 pages long. And what I want to do is I want to scroll to the very bottom of this report because whereas before I showed you the Joseph article and where that was published, at the bottom it has the source of this publication, and it is Mendez, 2014. And I do not want to discredit Mendez because I'm sure this took a lot of work and was certainly an important study, and a lot of work went into this. But I also want you to begin to think about, was this study peer-reviewed? And the answer to that is no. And in fact, this study was retrieved from Personal Communication on March 6, 2014, which simply is another way of saying this report was emailed or mailed to the publisher. It has not been through a peer-reviewed process. That doesn't mean to say that it could not have been through that process, but it is an important distinction that it was not. Should this publisher want this to be a peer-reviewed study, they would need to submit this report to a peer-reviewed journal for further review to determine, does it meet the standard that the publisher determines is important to meet their study. And it may or may not, but it is important to note that it has not been through that process thus far. Therefore, this would not be considered an evidence-based practice, but rather a report from the publisher saying what they propose that their curriculum does.